The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall, because it had a foundation on the rock. A foundation on the rock, not on shifting sands or something on emotion, right? Like, we don't base our faith on emotion. In this paper, I say, like, emotion might set the hook, so to speak, right? But it's not enough to like bring us through. It's not enough. There needs to be more than just a setting of the hook. The foundation that Jesus speaks about is a solid foundation, one that's not built on sand. But as one reads through this book, the first chapter, I forgot I had slides for this. This is Dan Barker with his book. But as one reads through this, you get the question, why did an evangelical pastor become an atheist? And that's what the book boasts. It says at the top here, how an evangelical preacher became one of America's leading atheists. Now, a lot of people would argue that his denomination isn't considered evangelical. And another thing is, my professor pointed out that the title godless, you see it's, what's his name? Yeah, Michelangelo painted, on the top of the church in Italy, Sistine Chapel. Yeah, I'm at a loss for words. So Michelangelo, I was even there, right? That's the bad part about it. But the Sistine Chapel, you can recognize the picture. It's like, it's missing God's finger, right? God's hand on the cover. And that's like, I don't know. But in any event, I feel like as one reads through the chapter, the feeling of sadness is overwhelming for someone who is deeply familiar with what the Bible teaches and what it says. It makes me think of the parable of the sower. Jesus explains that some seed that the farmer broadcasted fell upon the path, and the birds came and devoured it. Other seed fell on rocky ground where it did not have much soil, and immediately it sprang up, since it had no depth of soil. And when the sun rose, it was scorched, and since it had no root, it withered away. Other seed fell among the thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked it, and it yielded no grain. Other seed, this is Mark chapter 4, verses 4 through 8, by the way. Other seed fell into good soil and produced grain, growing up and increasing and yielding 30-fold and 60-fold and 100-fold. And I think it's a similar situation when someone bases his or her faith on a feeling, right? Or an emotion. Jesus continues explaining the seed that falls on the rocky ground. Pay attention to this. The ones who, when they hear the word, immediately receive it with joy, and they have no root in themselves, but endure for a while. Key phrase, they endure for a while. Then when tribulation or persecution arises on the account of the word, they immediately fall away. This is Dan Barker in a nutshell, right? He received the word with joy. Then when the questions came, eventually Barker states that, quote, at the far end of my theological migration, I was forced to admit that there is no basis for believing that a God exists except faith. and faith was not satisfactory to me. From here, Barker explains that after his parents were shocked because his father was a pastor as well. When his parents were shocked about his migration, quote unquote, they too became atheists. He eventually got a divorce, and he says that he is much happier now. And like, do you see why this is so like? Definitely, yeah, for sure.
Did he have something happen in his life that made him really bitter? Did something happen like?
No, he doesn't say that. He says that basically he started thinking about it, and that's what made him, like he couldn't reason, and that's why I'm saying like his emotion, his relationship with Jesus was based on an emotion. Like that's why there is frequently a danger in quote unquote revivals. You know what I'm saying? Because a lot of them are just based on emotion. They push you to Jesus emotionally. And like I said, it's good to set the hook. Emotion is good to set. I believe that God uses emotion to set the hook, right? The Hound of Heaven. Have you ever heard of that poem? You should definitely read it if you haven't. But Jesus, like, emotion sets the hook, but it's not enough to continue. We need a foundation. Like, we need to dig deep. But in any event, this is where the title of this curriculum comes into play. Barker and other popular atheists have arguments as to why atheism is true, just like Christian apologists have arguments. See on the inside cover of your, did everybody get one of these? They're on the stools in the middle of the aisles back there. But in the front cover, I put, what are some good arguments against atheism? And I list 3 arguments: the Kalam cosmological argument, the design argument, and the moral argument. And the Kalam, I'm sure you've heard all these before, but the Kalam is anything that begins to exist has a cause for its existence, right? And the idea there is just, it's simple. Like this candlestick has a cause for its existence. The table has a cause for its existence. A can of root beer has a cause for its existence. A VW bus has a cause for its existence. You see what I'm saying? Why would we not assume that there is no cause for existence for mountains or for lakes or the planet Earth or the moon or the universe, right? Why would we use this and say it's different for everything else? So the universe began to exist, which science definitely proves, which is kind of like in the face of atheism. And therefore the universe had a cause for its existence because the universe began to exist. In any case, you can look at the other arguments there, but so this curriculum will be going over several arguments for God's existence, and then we'll look at what atheists have to say about them. And it is the goal of this curriculum to show why these arguments and such might at first glance only appear threatening, but they're not actually threatening to the existence of God or the problem of evil or to the attributes of God, which all of these are discussed in this book. This other book that I have up here we'll be discussing is by Richard Dawkins. It's called The God Delusion. In other words, like, this is a 400-page book, right? 400 plus page book on why God does not exist. Do you see what's out there? You see what I'm saying? This is why I'm going to school, because of stuff like this, you know? And it's why we need to be ready in all circumstances to give an answer of the hope that is in us, right? 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 15. So, before things that we just discussed, the existence of God, the problem of evil, and the attributes, there's a couple things I want to point out. Number one is, at the beginning of the 4th chapter, he says the statement, Barker, all bark and no bite. I'm kind of hoping I get a good grade for something like that, I thought it was super clever, you know, but maybe my professor will be like, man, this guy is a dork. I feel bad for him, so I'll give him a B plus or an A, right? But in the 4th chapter, Barker says, what matters is what is true. And my question is, why does the truth matter? Like, it all seems to be an invention of purpose, right? Like, what is it that motivates an atheist? What is it that drives an atheist? You know what I'm saying? The person who believes that he ultimately becomes worm dirt in the graveyard. What you see what I'm saying? There must be an invention of purpose for their life. If in the end we only face the grave, what purpose is there? For an atheist, it seems like they would have to invent a purpose for life in order to feel some sense of fulfillment or hope. And the importance of truth is one of them, as we have seen. The question is, if everyone will ultimately be cold, lifeless dust at the heat death of our own sun, then why does anything matter at all? And I think that the answer is that nothing would matter at all if life just ultimately ceases to exist. Nothing would matter. Not only that, another thing you could talk about is what basis for truth, you know? Where do you get truth? Like, where does logic come from, you know? But another thing I think that needs to be addressed is faith. Atheists typically have a terrible definition of faith. Richard Dawkins says that it's a blind trust. We trust that God exists, or do we have let me ask you this. Well, let me get my ducks in a row here. This topic of faith it's spoken of and addressed by many atheists. And that's why I think we need to talk about it. Barker describes faith as, in his book, what you need when you do not have certainty. Faith is the evidence of non-evidence. Faith is the acceptance of the truth of a statement in spite of insufficient or contradictory evidence. Like, no Christian worth his salt would use those as definitions of faith, right? The problem is, it might seem correct at first, like what he's talking about, but this is not. Samuel chapter 17, verses 32 and 33 kind of clues us in a little bit. David said to Saul, "Let no one lose heart on account of the Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him." Saul replied, "You are able to go against this Philistine. You are not able to go against this Philistine and fight him. You are only a ruddy, young, scrawny boy. and he has been a warrior since his youth, right? Yeah. And what is interesting, when King David went before Saul and told him that he would kill the giant, and saw Saul, he saw this scrawny little boy, and he's like, what? You know? I think it's interesting that Saul had no faith in David. But David had faith, and it was evidence-based. Where was his evidence?
He already fought the lion and the bear.
He already killed a lion and a bear. He was, as you know, a shepherd and watched over the sheep, and he logically and courageously defended his claim that he would kill the giant by telling Saul that when he was watching over the sheep, a lion and a bear came, he killed both of them. The giant was no different. What was that, Jeff?
He grabbed the lion by the beard.
Yeah, there you go.
Bearded the lion.
Yeah. David had evidence-based faith. In fact, all faith is evidence-based. And I know that some people might disagree with that, but I'm telling you, I can show you where it is. Like, think about when Pharaoh had the plagues coming, he definitely had evidence to believe that God would do what Moses said he would do, right? God never asked Pharaoh to believe without evidence. Similarly, with the New Testament apostles, it all began with with the New Testament apostles. What does it say in John chapter 2 at the wedding of Cana? It says, well, when the New Testament disciples of Christ saw the works of Jesus in the wedding of Cana, what did he do there? Yeah, turned water to wine. It says they then put their faith in him. Is that interesting? The disciples were never asked to believe blindly. They were never asked to believe without evidence, and neither are atheists or anyone else. And this brings us to an excellent question. Why is there something rather than nothing at all? In other words, why does anything at all exist? And I think, keep in mind that this is for your relatives, your friends, your neighbors who do not believe that God exists. This is for you to combat and to battle, right? Look, with gentleness and respect, obviously, the idea that God does not exist. I want to inform you, so take this in and soak it up. Why does anything at all exist? Why is there existence of anything? For me to say nothing exists is self-contradictory, because I would have to exist in order to say that nothing exists. Does that make sense? But really, why do the trees, the rocks, the ants, the trout, the octopus, the turnips, the particles, the stars, and human beings exist? We're never asked to believe in God without evidence. The evidence is the witness of creation. Look at Romans chapter 1, verse 20. Men are without excuse because of the witness of creation. Because we have this evidence, we can have faith through natural theology that God indeed exists. This is a picture of Richard Dawkins with his book in the background, The God Delusion. I have an updated version. But again, he says, or he complains what he believes about faith and says, if children were taught to question and think through their beliefs instead of being taught the superior virtue of faith without question, it is a good bet there would be no suicide bombers. So, like, do you see what kind of arguments and language that they use? Number one, even Richard Dawkins has an implied definition of faith just backwards. It's just wrong. Yeah.
It just seems like those books, they bug me because they just go, it's like they take it right from the scripture, add a little word here, which we already know.
Yeah.
About. They add something, they twist something.
Yep.
And make it their gospel. It's just really.
Yeah. Atheists are known to twist scriptures, as are, cults and, what's that?
They have to have read the Bible.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Even a person who hasn't been a Pentecostal or whatever.
Right.
They have to have read it at some point to make that twist.
They have read at least parts of the Bible. Yeah. Dawkins regards faith here as something that is mindless, that people believe in something just because. He treats faith as if it is an enemy of thought, which is false. The Bible commands us in Matthew chapter 22, verses 36 through 40, to love God with all our heart and soul and what? Mind. That's a thing that, a lot of Christians miss, which is why I think possibly there are so many atheists, right? Because we don't love God with all our mind. But as we have discussed already, Dawkins and Barker and other atheists simply have it wrong about faith. And I have a Q&A session here, but we'll just keep going. At least I thought I did. Oh, okay. So, a popular way for atheists, if you'll see in your pamphlet, on the third column on the inside, you'll find the straw man. It says, this is a fallacy where the person seeks to change the argument into something that is not the actual argument, in order that he might be able to destroy such an argument. That's a typo. For instance, in the medieval times, it was much easier for a knight to joust a fake straw dummy on a horse than it was to joust a real man on a horse charging towards him, right? So to take down a straw man, this is called the straw man fallacy in formal logic. It's easier to refute something if I changed an argument, right? So we're going to look at something here. The theists' version of the Kalam cosmological argument, as you can see on the inside top, we've already discussed it. It says everything that begins to exist has a cause for its existence. The universe began to exist. Therefore, the universe has a cause for its existence, right? So the straw man comes into play with atheists here by changing the first premise. Everything that begins to exist has a cause for its existence, right? This is very simple. They changed the first premise to everything has a cause for its existence. Like, how does that change things? Everything has a cause for its existence. If everything has a cause for its existence, then this would also include God, right? If everything had a cause for its existence. But we're saying that everything that begins to exist, God never began to exist. God always existed, right? From eternity to eternity. So this is one way that they straw man the argument. They try to reduce it to something that's easier for them to destroy. And that's what a straw man is. And like I said, these are very typical in your conversations with atheists. So, what is interesting, I think, is that even though theists, people who believe in God, like myself, I'm a theist. Hopefully all of you are theists, right? But what's interesting is that atheists always try to continue to use this terrible argument. They try to continue using this argument despite it being destroyed by theists over and over and over. Dan Barker says in his book, a straw man. This is a straw man example. Misrepresenting someone's argument to make it easier to refute. And then there's a little cartoon there. It's a little bit far away for me to read. And given my contributions to this paper, I think that I deserve to share credit with the first author. So, fame is more important to you than science. See that, like, he's using a straw man right there. Oh, so what you're saying is fame is more important than science, right? He's like, what? I didn't say that. Oh, so now I'm senile too? You see how a straw man works, right? It's easy to joust a straw fake man. In any case, the major premise of this argument, Dan Barker says in his book, everything had a cause, quote unquote, is contradicted by the conclusion that God did not have a cause. Like, come on, dude. Are you serious? First cause, right? So this is like, he's going in a different direction here with the cosmological argument, but I don't know. The thing is, this is not what Christians ever said. We were never, ever, absolutely everything had a cause for its existence, including God. And then contradicting ourselves by saying, oh no, wait, not God, right? We never, ever said that in the history of Christianity, in the 20 centuries of Christianity, right? So there is no bite to how Barker and other atheists use this argument against the cosmological argument. The first premise, everything that begins to exist has a cause for its existence, does not include God, because God never began to exist. Like, think about it. The universe, right? Say it's a sphere or a box, whatever you like better. But the universe, in order for God to create it, outside of it, he couldn't create anything in it with him in it. That's like logically absurd, right? If God created time, space, and matter in the universe, in the borders of the universe, right? Then he couldn't be in it, because if he did, then he would have created himself, which is just ridiculous. You see what I'm saying? Like, out of nothing. Which we'll get to more of that in the future. Further along in the book, Barker accuses the Kalam cosmological argument of begging the question. But Jason McCracken, this guy who wrote a chapter in another book, and it's called Answering the Music Man, because Dan Barker was a musician. And he like made all these plays and stuff like that. But Answering the Music Man is an excellent book. If you want to read this, you have to get, this is my requirements, you have to get the book, Answering the Music Man. But Barker's making a categorical mistake in saying that these atheists use, quote, things that do not have a beginning as just a synonym for the word God. But the Kalam never, the Kalam, as you can see on the screen, never never claims that this is a synonym for God, right? So Barker's making a categorical error. In other words, this is getting kind of heady here, but everything that begins to exist has a cause for its existence. That never says the Christian God, right? This is just an idea to change like one's mind from believing that there was that nothing can't create anything. You see what I'm saying? Everything that begins to exist has a cause for its existence. This is called the law of causality. And it's just simple, like whatever is there, it was caused by something else. So, whatever we choose to call this being that is the cause of the universe, the greatest conceivable being, we can know naturally that he must be timeless in order to create time. He must be timeless in order to create time. Does that make sense? He could not be in time and create it, right? Yeah. The notion is absurd. He must be spaceless, in other words, non-physical, immaterial, right? In order to create material. Otherwise, he would be creating himself. Yeah. On top of these, he must be personal because he created personal beings. He must be unimaginably powerful because he created the universe out of nothing. Like, imagine the power of God. He created everything we see, hear, smell, taste, and touch. Whether we're in India or Montana, right? He created it all out of nothing. And I don't mean like space as in, outer space is nothing, nothingness. Because space technically is not nothing, right? Space is something. I'm saying out of nothing, no thing, right? Literally, no thing. God created. So this begins our first Q&A session, so we can have about 15 minutes here if there's any questions about what we discussed this morning. And next time we get together for Contenders, we'll go a little deeper in this discussion, and considerably deeper every time. I think it's pretty interesting, but it should only maybe 4 or 5 sessions we can get this all wrapped up. Is there any questions you have? Do you have any experiences with atheists, Lynette?
Not experience with atheists, but the thing I don't understand, do they believe in science?
Do they believe in science?
If they believe in science, science is always looking for a cause.
Yes.
And
Right.
So
Oops.
but nowadays, science is very important.
Yeah.
They're glorifying it because they found these vaccines.
Right.
And so, are they scientifically minded?
Yes, I would say they claim to be, definitely. That's a good question. Are they scientifically minded atheists? So, like, the issue here is that they do what is called scientism, right? It's like, there's a book by J.P. Moreland that wrote this scientism, or I can't think of the title right now, but in any case, like, atheists boast that they are scientists. Dawkins' website, at least, I don't know, a year ago, there was you know how there's like, you go to a website and there's a couple of menus at the top? He has one called I effing love science, and it's spelled out. Like, so they boast, like, what's the word I'm looking for? They boast like, what's a word for like someone who swears a lot or something? Explicitly. They boast explicitly that they are lovers of science. But the problem is, they straw man it, and they also red herring it. Red herring, you'll see in the pamphlet, in the third column, it says, this is a fallacy that seeks to change the direction of the argument in order to avoid the argument itself. Like centuries ago, when Englishmen went fox hunting on horseback, they would use dogs to track down a fox. They would hunt foxes from horseback, right? And the dogs, the hunters, would drag this red herring, a fish, right, this smelly fish, across the path of where the fox trail, where the fox tracks were. And they would look to see if the dog would follow the fox tracks still, or if they would follow the red herring, right? If they followed the red herring, then they knew that the dog was useless. Like, I don't want this dog. He can't even track. He gets distracted, right? And similarly with atheists, they frequently use red herrings. They distract from the argument. And they do that frequently when talking about science and those kind of things. So, yeah, in any case, it's kind of interesting. Dave, did you have something?
It was on the sign.
Yeah. Okay. So, I think what's kind of cool about the Kalam cosmological argument, everything that begins to exist as a cause for its existence. Number two, the universe began to exist. Now, this is a problem for a lot of people. They don't want to believe that the universe began to exist. But what's awesome here is that science proves that the universe had a beginning. There's something called the red shift. I'm sure you've heard me talk about that before. It's the Doppler effect of the light spectrum. So this light spectrum, for instance, Albert Einstein, after basically coming up with the theory of relativity, he didn't want to believe in God. Albert Einstein didn't want to believe in God. He didn't want to believe that, because then, you have to obey rules and all that kind of stuff. That's what a lot of atheists believe, that God is some guy with this big giant gavel slamming down, big white beard, like, come on, people. This isn't a cartoon, But this red shift, Albert Einstein went to Edwin Hubble and looked through the telescope that Edwin Hubble had. And when he saw what Edwin Hubble discovered, which is called the red shift, in other words, what Edwin Hubble saw was like these colors of red, these hues of red. And what that meant was light was traveling away from his eyeball, right? So what that told them, there's like all these big words I could use, like the Borguth-Vilenkin theorem, which talks about, how there's this ultimate beginning of the universe. Banding, right? There had to be an ultimate, if you would reverse time, there had to be an ultimate beginning. So they can't get away from it. They've all come up with different kinds of, they're called universe models. One that comes to mind is called the oscillating model. And it's basically that the second law of thermodynamics, right? Entropy, every energy just runs out, right? So when the energy comes up, at the oscillating model, the universe, like, it blossoms like a flower, and then it dies, right? Because the energy runs out. And then all of a sudden, this oscillating model appears again, poof, there's another, but the question is, why is it happening? Like, it's a simple, like, the standard model, the Big Bang Theory, they call it. The standard model, and I know a lot of Christians run from that phrase, but the Big Bang Theory literally proves that there was an ultimate beginning of the universe. The redshift shows us that we can, what we can analyze, that the universe ultimately had a beginning. If we would travel back in time, then the universe would shrink back to itself and ultimately to zero, to nothing. So this is one way that atheists try to red herring this second premise: the universe began to exist. They distract, argue different models, like the oscillating model, where it just comes up and explodes, and it's like it dies, and then all of a sudden it comes up. Or there's another model that's more like a meta model, which is called the multiverse, which there's multiple universes, right? So we have multiple planets, we have multiple galaxies, like Andromeda Galaxy is our closest galaxy. But there's literally hundreds and billions of galaxies in the universe we can see from the Hubble telescope, which is just mind-boggling to think about. Like, we're in the Milky Way galaxy, and there's like probably, I don't know the number, millions and millions of stars and planets in the Milky Way galaxy. That's just one. And there's like literally billions of galaxies. Like, imagine the power of God. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just like, oh, anyways, where was I? So, this universe began to exist. The oscillating model, the multiverse, yeah. So, atheists, right? Our universe, they say that there are multiple universes, right? With multiple billions of galaxies. But the question is, no matter what happens, it would require there to be a beginning for all of them. And the other question is, what is it that generated all these universes? Like, what kind of machine did this? You know what I'm saying? Like, the multiverse fails, and it is only a theory. And because we will never, ever, 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 ever be able to leave our universe, we can never examine or analyze or anything another universe. So the multiverse will only ever be a theory with no evidence whatsoever. So an atheist who says to you that the multiverse exists, they're saying that it's based on probability. Like, the more universes there are, but it's more probable that life would pop up out of nowhere, right? That's what they're saying, because the issue is consciousness. Where does consciousness come from? Is consciousness material or is it immaterial? Jeff?
Well, that's when you say to them, that's blind faith.
Yeah, that's exactly. Believing that probability over millions and billions and billions and trillions of years and all these other universes, perhaps billions of other universes, not just galaxies, mind you. They're saying that eventually, life would probably come up. Life would, it's got a chance. But the question is, like, there's so many things beyond that. Where does consciousness, how could non-life create life? How could How could a rock create life? You know what I'm saying? How could chemicals create life? Life, where we can think. Cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am, right? How could that be? Any other questions? Jim?
I've had friends that did the same thing Barbara did, because they didn't love God. They had something happen in their life. John McGraw, probably my best friend in high school, got in a car wreck when he was going to college, almost died. They had to reconstruct his whole head.
Yeah.
He was the lead head math guy at the University of Idaho. But he said, I had time to reflect and to think, and I don't believe in God anymore. And I feel, I don't know if you're, it's because they didn't love God. They didn't seek God at that time. They blamed God, I think.
Right. Yeah, which is interesting in itself, because if you blame God, then you're implying that he exists.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're angry at God, which is a lot of times the case with atheists, I believe, because they were burned, you know, quote unquote.
That's
Like,
what John said. He goes, at that time I searched and I thought, how could God do this or let this happen to me?
yeah,
God didn't let that happen. You ran into the back of a semi-truck in a Volkswagen. That's your fault, not God's.
yeah.
You know, you wasn't driving.
Well, yeah, we'll definitely discuss some of this stuff during the sermon this morning as well. But in any case, yeah. Wait.
I was just wondering, maybe it's a tangent off of this, but, you know, the first premise, everything that begins to exist has a cause for its existence. And atheists, but even a lot of Christians, but, you know, like, they think that love, hate, good, evil, all these things are created things.
Yeah, yeah,
So I think, you know, when we say that, you know, God did not begin to exist, God has always been, but some, you know, science tries to make all of these other things that are traits of God or lack of God
right,
into created things.
yeah,
And, you know, like you were just talking about, where there's reason.
yeah, right. And we're definitely going to get to that. That's interesting. We've discussed this several weeks ago when we were talking about Islam. Like the key idea with the Trinity, the doctrine of the Trinity, is love, right? God is love. How could God be love if God was Unitarian, like the Muslim God, Allah? You see what I'm saying? God, Allah, never had a son, right? How could he be love? How could he be love if nothing else existed? Only him. How could he be love? Do you see what I'm saying? Like before God created everything from an Islamic perspective, before God created anything at all, angels or whatever, right? How could Allah be love? And the answer is he couldn't. But the doctrine of the Trinity shows us differently. Like the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, the persons, they are love from eternity to eternity. God is love.
But, I mean,
Yeah.
not Muslim Christian, the Muslim wouldn't have that concept as a part of their theology anyway, would they?
No. The Trinity?
No, that God is love.
Oh, correct. Yeah.
They say that God is loving. Yeah, they don't say that God is love. But like this is a
Problem. You know what I'm saying? In Islam. And this is why, like, there's so many, you know, fundamental
Islamic terrorism and all that kind of stuff. Like the Quran definitely teaches its
readers to be a warmonger like Muhammad.
A lot of people get tripped up on that God was created evil,
Right, yeah. Yeah.
a lot of Christians know that.
Right, yeah. And we'll definitely get to that. It's in this paper as well, in this curriculum. So, I don't want to steal all my thunder today, but it's very interesting. Yeah. And it's good to know these things, because if you talk to anybody about God, which the more you know about God, the more you're going to talk about him, right? But like when you're confronted with these things, it's good to have answers, because it'll help you be confident in speaking again. So, in any case, let's go to the Lord in prayer. Lord Jesus, we thank you for this day and for your blessings. We thank you for your mercy and your grace and your healing. Lord, your word says, bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all his benefits. He heals us. He heals all our diseases. Lord, we worship you. We thank you, Jesus. I thank you that I'm just able to come back and just be here with my church family. Lord, we just pray that you would have your blessings upon us and continue to use us for your honor and glory in this community and wherever you would see fit. We praise you, Jesus. We worship you. Be with us in all we do. It's in your holy and perfect name.